Professor Ethan Miller adjusted his sensory membranes, gliding effortlessly through the flawless corridors of the Galactic Academy of Xenical Studies, the most esteemed institution across the cosmos for studying alien species. His iridescent scales reflected under the soft, bioluminescent glow that illuminated the crystal-clear walls, casting a dazzling array of colors that would make any Earth rainbow seem pale in comparison. Another day of educating the young minds about the peculiarities of carbon-based life forms, CCS muttered under his breath, a habit he'd picked up from watching too many human educational programs. The thought caused his secondary breathing holes to emit a light whistle of amusement. The Academy, perched high in orbit around the gas giant Nexus Prime, was a true feat of engineering. Its spiral architecture, resembling a DNA helix, was a deliberate design choice that caused some of the silicon-based faculty to roll their optical organs. But, as Ethan would often say, when the Galactic Council of Higher Education is funding you, one learns to appreciate their flair for the dramatic. Ethan's tail flicked back and forth as he approached his lecture hall, causing nearby floating data pads to scatter like startled prey. The Department of Human Studies occupied an entire wing of the Academy, much to the displeasure of the Sci-Faxian swarm, who were forced to share their space with 3 other departments. But with humanity's rapid rise in galactic society and their unique approach to survival, the expansion was deemed essential. "Good morning, Professor Miller," chirped Zane Cooper, his teaching assistant, a gelatinous cube whose enthusiasm for knowledge was rivaled only by its talent for absorbing and cataloging it, literally. "Today's lecture on human pain tolerance is all set, and I've updated the safety protocols as requested." "Excellent work, Zane," Ethan said, his facial ridges lifting in what was considered a smile among his species, although he still believed the plasma shields were a bit excessive. "Our human subjects have assured us countless times that they won't spontaneously combust during lectures." The lecture hall itself stood as a testament to the Academy's commitment to inclusion, with seats designed to accommodate everyone from methane-breathing giants to microscopic beings sealed in their environmental suits. The air, expertly regulated, supported life for all species, making sure no one was too comfortable, but no one suffocated either. A feat that had earned the Environmental Systems team 3 Galactic Excellence Awards. As students began to arrive, oozing, gliding, and teleporting into the hall, CCS brought up his presentation on human resilience. The holographic display showed a rotating image of the human skeletal structure, with its unnervingly solid internal support. Even after years of study, the sight still made Ethan grateful that his species had evolved with a more practical external carapace. "Remember," he muttered under his breath, checking his notes, "no jokes about human endoskeletal systems being inside out." The last time he'd made that joke, it had resulted in a strongly worded letter from the Cultural Sensitivity Board. His third eye winked at the memory. Apparently humans didn't find the idea as amusing as he did. The hall was nearly packed now, with representatives from nearly every spacefaring species in attendance. The crystalline Aloria chimed in resonance as they settled into their seats, their bodies producing a delicate musical sound. The Thragari swirled in their containment fields, their thoughts visible as shifting, colorful patterns in their vaporous forms. Even a few members of the Nixari, usually elusive, had materialized in the back row, their presence indicated only by the slight distortion in the light surrounding them. Ethan's antennae twitched in anticipation. Today's lecture was sure to be especially intriguing, particularly with the new transfer student who would be joining them. He'd personally reviewed the application, a human eager to assist with live demonstrations. The thought made Ethan's primary heart flutter with academic excitement. The lecture hall's entrance portal shimmered as Madison Brooks stepped through, and the collective gasp nearly drained the room's oxygen supply. Zane swiftly adjusted the life support systems, while several Vintax students began to condense out of sheer shock. Madison was a living, walking canvas. Her arms were covered in intricate tattoos that seemed to tell a story. Dragons spewing fire, spaceships soaring through cosmic storms, and an impressively accurate depiction of the Galactic Council's last budget meeting. Her neck bore a stunning recreation of Earth's solar system, and beneath her academy uniform were hints of even more elaborate artwork. "Greetings, everyone," Madison's voice rang out with characteristic human confidence. "Sorry if I startled anyone. The translation matrix warned me that some species might find my appearance interesting." Interesting hardly seemed to do it justice. 3 of the crystalline Lumerians had started resonating at frequencies that risked shattering their neighbors. A young Erethan, startled, accidentally phased through his chair. Even the members of the Nixari were so captivated that they'd forgotten to stay invisible. Ethan's sensory membranes quivered with delight at the teaching opportunity. "Class, please welcome our new transfer student, Madison Brooks from Earth," CCS announced. "As you can see, she provides an excellent example of human decorative practices, specifically the art of tattooing." Immediately, a forest of appendages, tentacles, and energy signatures shot into the air. CCS pointed to a hovering plasma entity named Varnu. "Yes, Professor Varnu, do you have a question?" Varnu crackled nervously. "My species database indicates that humans have pain receptors throughout their dermal layer. Yet Miss Brooks seems to have voluntarily allowed someone to repeatedly puncture her skin with pigment-injecting devices. Has she perhaps suffered neural damage?" Madison burst into laughter, causing several empathic students to experience a spontaneous rush of joy. "No neural damage here," she replied, although my mom did question my sanity. "When the quantum physics equation was placed across my shoulders, more appendages shot up as a multi-eyed arachnid student excitedly chittered, 'But why subject yourself to such unnecessary pain? Our research shows that humans instinctively avoid painful stimuli, yet you've chosen to endure hundreds of thousands of micro-injuries for aesthetic reasons.'" "Well," Sophie Hall replied, casually perched on the professor's desk, much to the dismay of the more conservative students, "humans have a complicated relationship with pain. Sometimes we intentionally seek it out, whether for personal growth, artistic expression, or just to prove we can endure it. Plus, each tattoo tells my story. Everyone marks a specific moment, memory, or passion." Professor Ethan watched as his students furiously scribbled down notes, their various recording methods creating a chorus of clicks, bubbles, and quantum fluctuations. He decided to steer the conversation into a more academic direction. "Perhaps, Miss Brooks, you could elaborate on the process. Many of our students struggle to comprehend why any sentient being would willingly undergo such a procedure." "Of course, Professor," Sophie grinned, causing a ripple of fascination among the students who were still trying to decipher human facial expressions. "Actually, I was planning on getting a new piece done this week. As part of my thesis project, I'm documenting human body modification practices. Would your class be interested in observing?" The collective excitement that followed overloaded the universal translators for a full 30 seconds. When the noise died down, Professor Ethan fought to maintain his professional demeanor while his scales shimmered in every possible shade of academic enthusiasm. "That would indeed be an invaluable learning experience," he managed to say, while his assistant Zane vibrated with what could only be described as pure joy. "However, we'll need to update the safety protocols again. The last time we introduced students to human recreational activities, the ethics committee had to hire additional staff." Sophie raised an eyebrow, a gesture that intrigued her alien classmates. "What happened?" "Well, someone showed them videos of human extreme sports," Zane bubbled nervously. "3 Chronomancer students tried to calculate the survival probability and ended up crashing the academy's main computer. We're still trying to convince the Krathnori that humans don't actually have 9 lives." "Speaking of survival," a hesitant voice came from the back, where a group of Virefs hovered. "Our preliminary scans indicate that Miss Brooks has survived this tattooing process numerous times. Is that typical for humans?" Sophie stretched her body, revealing even more intricate tattoos along her collarbone. "Oh yeah. My friend back home has even more than I do. She's a quantum mechanic and has a whole sleeve dedicated to string theory. It's a great conversation starter with clients." The Academy's observation theater had never been so packed. Professor Ethan had to requisition additional gravity generators to accommodate all the floating species who wished to witness the demonstration. What was normally used for studying microscopic life had been transformed into what Sophie casually called a tattoo parlor, much to the confusion of the linguistics department. "Now remember," Professor Ethan addressed the packed room, his scales shifting to an authoritative shade of purple. "This is a scientific observation. Please maintain your composure. And yes, that includes you, quantum physics students. No calculating pain coefficients in real time. We don't need another probability cascade like the hot sauce incident." The tattoo artist, another human named Luke Bennett, which several alien students assumed was a title rather than a name, was setting up his equipment. Just the sight of the needles caused 3 gelatinous observers to temporarily lose their form. Professor Zane wobbled nervously. "Are you certain that containment fields are necessary?" The energy expenditure alone is after last semester's great sneeze panic. Absolutely necessary. Ethan's antennae twitched at the recollection. Besides, the ethics committee insisted. Apparently some species find voluntary pain contagious. Sophie settled comfortably in the modified observation chair, scrolling through her data pad. You guys are going to love this design. It's a tribute to my time here, a DNA helix morphing into the Academy's spiral architecture. Luke, a burly man whose tattoos seemed to shift with the specialized lighting, grunted appreciatively as he calibrated his tools. Just a reminder, folks, no flash photography. Some of your visual spectrums make my hands tingle, and trust me, you don't want me getting jumpy with these needles. The recording equipment hummed to life as sensors designed to monitor everything from neural activity to quantum fluctuations surrounded the tattooing station. A particularly enthusiastic group of Relenthi had even set up an empathy relay to share the experience with each other, though Professor Ethan had strongly advised against it. For those unfamiliar with human anatomy, Ethan began his pre-EMR lecture. We will be observing the insertion of pigment into Miss Brooks' dermal layer. This process involves, yes, question? Entity 7, a shimmering mass of probability waves, shifted into a vaguely curious shape. Will there be blood? A minor capillary disruption is expected, Ethan replied smoothly. The resulting murmurs sent the universal translators into overdrive, and several photonic beings dimmed their luminescence in what passed for a squeamish reaction. Guys, relax, Sophie laughed, causing nearby empaths to sway with inexplicable joy. I've done this plenty of times, but I do recommend the squeamish switch to infrared vision during the process. It's less dramatic that way. Luke finished his preparations, and the tattoo machine hummed to life, making several crystalline observers vibrate sympathetically. Ready when you are, Madison. Standard pain scale updates? Sophie asked. You bet, Professor, she replied, flashing him a grin. Your students might find this interesting. We humans use a numerical scale to rate pain, though it's pretty subjective. I'll be calling out ratings periodically for your data. Professor Ethan's teaching tendrils wiggled with excitement. Excellent. Class, please note that humans quantify their pain experiences. The scale ranges from 1 to 10, with 10 being... What is it, Zane? The teaching assistant had turned an alarming shade of purple. Professor, Zane said nervously, our preliminary calculations suggest that the pain Miss Brooks is about to voluntarily endure would register as a 7.3 on most species' consciousness termination scales. Oh, please, Sophie snorted. Sophie, I once stepped on something called a Lego, and let me tell you, this is nothing. The room's atmosphere immediately shifted, growing more tense. A group of quantum observers had to be reminded not to split into multiple probability states from their nervous energy. In the corner, the Nixari had unconsciously grouped together, while the Krathnori students were betting on how long it would take for someone to faint. Luke carefully cleaned the area on Sophie's forearm, the disinfectant scent filling the air and causing several chemosensitive students to gasp. Last chance to back out, everyone, Sophie said, smirking. But just so you know, this is pretty mild compared to the human dental procedures I saw some of you watching in the cafeteria. Professor Ethan quickly stepped forward, trying to prevent a mass exodus. Perhaps we should focus on the artistic elements instead. Miss Brooks, would you explain your design choice and its placement? He was cut off by the tattoo machine buzzing to life, a sound that made several sonic-sensitive species duck into their protective fields. Oh my, is that the usual sound for the machine? Sophie simply smiled, a gesture that had quickly become associated with impending human shenanigans among the students. Data recording systems are at optimal levels, Zane announced, maintaining an air of professionalism despite shifting into their stress-induced cubic form. Quantum observation matrices are stable, empathy relays are functioning, and the emergency response team is on standby. They also asked me to remind everyone that existential crisis counseling has a 24-hour waiting period. Luke carefully positioned the needle, and the entire room collectively held its breath, each species' respiratory response uniquely timed. Ready? Sophie gave a thumbs up, a human gesture that had the xenobiology department still scrambling to decode. Hit me, she said. But remember, no matter what you see, this is perfectly normal. And yes, I'm looking at you, timeline observers. No trying to change the past to stop this. We've talked about this after the coffee discovery incident. The first touch of the needle caused a wave of reactions across the room. 2 virefs instantly condensed into liquids, while the quantum probability students were reminded again to maintain a single timeline. In the back, the Nixari began stress-shedding their darkness. Pain scale at a solid 3, Sophie announced cheerfully as Luke continued the outline. Nothing serious, just feels like a cat scratch. Oh, Professor Ethan, did you get those research papers I sent on human pain endorphins? Professor Ethan's scales shifted to an intriguing blend of horrified green and excited purple. Yes, though perhaps we should discuss them later. When you're not being repeatedly stabbed with. He paused as Luke increased the machine speed, creating a high-pitched buzz that made several sonic-sensitive species retreat into protective bubbles. Faster for better results with the fine lines, Luke explained. Need a break? Luke asked. Nah, I'm good, Sophie responded, though she smirked. I think some of our observers might need one. Zane, who had started to lose their cubic shape, answered, Just adjusting my observation parameters, Miss Brooks. Though our empathy relay is registering some concerning readings from the Krathnori section. A collective groan filled the room. They had made the mistake of maintaining their emotional link during the procedure. How are you able to carry on a casual conversation while experiencing Category 3 tissue damage? Their spokesperson vibrated with disbelief. This is nothing. Sophie waved her free hand dismissively, causing several students nearby to flinch. You should see humans getting their eyebrows done. That stings. Pain scale still holding at 3, by the way, Sophie added with a grin. Maybe 3.5 when we hit the boner areas. Luke switched needles for the shading process, and the resulting change in pitch sent 3 crystalline observers into sympathetic cracking. Professor Ethan quickly adjusted their resonance fields before continuing with his observations. Note the subject's steady vital signs, he announced, his professional tone undermined by his antennae's slight tremor. Despite the clear dermal trauma, Miss Brooks shows no signs of distress. In fact, her stress indicators are lower than most species show during normal atmospheric pressure fluctuations. That's because this is actually pretty relaxing, Sophie said, laughing at the collective disbelief that almost overloaded the universal translators. No, really, it's like a meditative experience. Some humans even fall asleep during these sessions. The idea of sleeping through voluntary pain caused a minor riot in the psychic section. Several reality weavers tried to correct what they saw as a tear in the fabric of reality itself. Speaking of sleeping, Luke added while continuing to work on the DNA helix. Remember that guy who snored through his entire back piece? Oh yeah, that was wild, Sophie chuckled. Pain scale update. Hitting a 4 now that we're into solid shading. Nothing compared to the time I accidentally touched my quantum physics professor's plasma containment field. A small group of energy beings in the front row began cycling rapidly through various colors of distress. But our calculations suggest the nerve-ending stimulation should be intense, one of them stammered. Yeah, humans are weird like that, Sophie shrugged. We can endure insane amounts of pain if we're doing something we enjoy, like running marathons, eating super spicy foods, or watching tragedy HDs for fun. The mention of voluntary emotional pain was too much for the empaths, who had to form a support circle in the corner. Meanwhile, the temporal students were frantically taking notes, finally giving up on finding a timeline where this made any sense. Luke paused to wipe away some excess ink, causing several squeamish species to activate their selective vision filters. Starting the color work now? Still good, Sophie asked. Never better, Luke said with a grin. I think we've lost a few more observers, Sophie remarked, glancing around. Anyone keeping count of the feigning incidents? Zane, who had managed to mostly restore their cubic form, consulted their datapad. 7 full consciousness losses, 13 temporary phase shifts, and 1 particularly interesting case of spontaneous mitosis from the binary beings, still within expected parameters for human demonstration events. Professor Ethan's third eye twitched nervously, a surefire sign of academic excitement overload. Miss Brooks, would you say this experience is comparable to other human voluntary pain activities? Sophie shrugged. Honestly, this is nothing. You should see what we do in our gyms or beauty salons. The pain scale held steady at 4, perhaps 4.5 on the color packing. The conversation about human beauty practices quickly escalated into a lively discussion, but it had to be cut short when several students showed signs of extreme distress. The mere mention of waxing caused 2 philosophy majors to reconsider their very existence. Almost done with the academy spiral, Luke announced, his hands steady amid the growing chaos. Want to show them the UV reactive ink? At the mention of ultraviolet properties, the photonic beings perked up, emerging from their horror-induced dim state. Sophie grinned, that increasingly worrying human expression that the xenobiology department was starting to dread. "Watch this, guys," she said, shifting beneath the UV light Luke had set up, causing her previous tattoos to glow in mesmerizing patterns. Cool, right? The quantum formula on my shoulder actually shows the wave function collapse when exposed to different light frequencies. The physics department representatives, who had been maintaining remarkable composure, finally lost it. Their excited chattering about practical quantum observations through human pain endurance had to be forcibly muted to avoid a cascade of unauthorized experiments. "And done," Luke called, wiping away the excess ink. "Just under 2 hours. Not bad for a demonstration piece." Professor Ethan, now pale, asked in disbelief, "You've been enduring nerve stimulation for 2 standard planetary rotations?" Sophie, admiring the fresh tattoo in the mirror, responded casually, "Yeah, quick session actually. Pain never got above a 5, and that was just when he was close to hitting the wrist bone. Want to see the plan for the matching piece on the other arm?" The resulting exodus of stressed observers nearly caused a malfunction in the theater's door mechanisms. Those who stayed were caught between horror and fascination, especially when Sophie started discussing her ideas for a full-back piece, which would represent the entire history of human space exploration. Professor Ethan, attempting to maintain some semblance of academic dignity, cleared his throat. "I believe we've gathered sufficient data for today, though I must ask, Miss Brooks, why are you smiling like that?" "Oh, I just remembered," Sophie said, grinning wider. "Next week I'm getting my industrial piercing redone. Anyone up for another demonstration?" The Academy's medical wing was thrown into utter chaos. Dr. Julian Carter, head of comparative xenobiology, stared at the readings with all 7 of his optical organs, while his tentacles frantically adjusted various holographic displays. "This can't be right," he muttered, his bioluminescent spots flickering with academic distress. "Run the analysis again." Dr. Mason Hale, a being made primarily of ionized gas contained within a sophisticated environment suit, swirled in agitation. "We've run it 12 times, Doctor. The human pain response readings are consistent. They just don't make sense." Sophie sat casually on the examination table, swinging her legs as various scanning beams passed over her new tattoo. The medical staff buzzed, floated, and phased in a state of controlled panic. "Look at these endorphin levels." Dr. Carter's primary tentacle jabbed at a holographic chart. "By all accounts, Miss Brooks' body treated the 2-hour tattoo session as a mild inconvenience. Pain management systems barely engaged, well below baseline." "That's because it really wasn't that bad," Sophie shrugged, causing several junior medical assistants to flinch. "But the endorphin thing is pretty cool. Humans call it a runner's high when we get it from exercise." Dr. Mason Hale's gaseous form condensed slightly in horror. "You mean to say you deliberately trigger your pain response system for pleasure?" "Sure," Sophie replied nonchalantly. "Why do you think we invented roller coasters? Speaking of which, is the Academy ever going to lift the ban on human recreational activities? The engineering department keeps begging me to explain the concept of bungee jumping." Professor Ethan, who had joined the medical team for the analysis, quickly intervened before anyone could pull up those particular files. "Perhaps we should focus on the comparative analysis, doctors?" Yes, Dr. Carter quickly pulled up a new set of holograms. "We've compared Miss Brooks' readings to our database of known species. The closest pain tolerance we found is in the magma dwellers of Nexus 7, but they evolved in lava." A junior researcher, whose species communicated through interpretive crystalline formations, chimed in. "The neural response patterns are fascinating. When we showed the recordings to the Krathnori Medical Division, they tried to classify humans as a pain-immune species." "We're definitely not pain-immune," Sophie laughed. "We just have a really strange relationship with it. Like, I barely noticed the tattoo, but I'll complain for hours if I get a paper cut." Dr. Mason Hale swirled thoughtfully. "Our analysis shows that human pain threshold variations are almost entirely psychological. You can simply choose to ignore pain." "Yep, it's all about context," Sophie nodded. "Humans can ignore major injuries during sports games but act like they're dying when they get a mild cold. We're pretty funny that way." The collective confusion from the medical team was almost tangible. Dr. Carter's bioluminescent spots shifted to pale blue, indicating scientific bewilderment. But the evolutionary implications, why would a species develop the ability to ignore survival warnings? Probably because we kept doing dangerous things that ended up being useful, Sophie suggested. Like the first person to try spicy food probably regretted it, but now we put hot sauce on everything. Did you know we have restaurants where you have to sign pain waivers? The ensuing medical discussion about human culinary practices had to be quickly redirected when several researchers began showing signs of sympathetic digestive distress. The endorphin analysis is particularly interesting, Professor Ethan noted, trying to steer the conversation back to a more scientific focus. The conversation quickly shifted back to academic analysis as Dr. Carter's tentacles swept over the holographic displays. It seems humans have developed multiple parallel systems for pain management, he observed. Yes, their bodies naturally produce opioid compounds, but the truly fascinating part is how they've learned to voluntarily trigger these releases. The tattoo session showed a steady endorphin flow, but it's far less than we'd expect for such significant tissue trauma. That's because Sophie was calm, Luke replied from the corner, where he'd been tidying up his tools. You should see the readings when humans get tattoos and are nervous about it. The anticipation actually makes it hurt more. The idea of psychological pain modulation sent the neurological research team into a frenzy of data collection. 3 quantum brain specialists had to be reminded once again to avoid merging into a collective consciousness of confusion. But the most puzzling aspect, Dr. Mason Hale swirled thoughtfully, is the social component. Miss Brooks's pain tolerance actually increased by 23% when explaining the procedure to the observers. How is that possible? Sophie grinned, which caused several medical monitors to emit alarming beeps, a familiar sign of an impending human revelation. Oh, that's just showing off. Humans love proving we can handle things. It's like a game. A game? Dr. Carter's bioluminescent spots shifted to an ultraviolet hue, displaying disbelief. You treat pain response modulation as entertainment? Well, yeah, Sophie shrugged casually. Why do you think we have all those spicy food challenges, or competitions to see who can keep their hand in ice water the longest? Please, Professor Ethan interjected, noticing the increasing distress among the medical staff. Let's not introduce them to human party games just yet. The psychology department is still recovering from learning about truth or dare. Dr. Carter's tentacles wrapped tightly around his clipboard like a security blanket. I believe we have sufficient data for preliminary analysis, though I must ask, Miss Brooks. These readings suggest you're already planning another procedure? Oh, definitely, Sophie said with a grin. I'm thinking of getting a full-sleeve design based on the quantum entanglement equations we've been studying. I'll add some UV reactive ink to show particle spin states, and maybe throw in some thermochromic pigments to demonstrate wave function collapse. The physics department representatives, who had remained mostly silent, suddenly became intensely interested. The conversation quickly escalated into a discussion about using human body art for quantum visualization, which had to be shut down swiftly before anyone could submit a research proposal. I believe, Professor Ethan interjected firmly, that's quite enough excitement for the medical team today. Though I must admit, the data we've gathered on human pain response flexibility will revolutionize several fields of study. Just wait until they learn about human childbirth. Sophie whispered to Luke, causing the nearby empathic sensors to overload with their responses. The Academy's Grand Lecture Hall was filled to capacity for the emergency symposium on human pain tolerance. Word of the tattoo demonstration had spread faster than a quantum rumor, and it led to what Professor Ethan could only describe as a scientific crisis of faith among the galactic academic community. Order, please, he called, his scales shifting to an authoritative crimson as he addressed the gathered faculty and students. Yes, I understand this new data is unsettling, but throwing probability matrices at the problem won't change the results. In the front row, Sophie and Luke sat, trying to suppress their laughter as various alien species argued about their own existence. The theoretical evolution department was in disarray, with 3 professors immediately requesting sabbaticals to rewrite their thesis papers. But it changes everything, a neutron being pulsed with anxiety. With academic distress, Dr. Carter's voice trembled. We've been classifying humans as a moderately resilient species. Now you're telling us they can simply choose to ignore their pain responses? Not exactly, Sophie interjected, standing up to address the now hushed crowd. We still feel the pain. We've just gotten really good at deciding whether or not it matters. The room erupted into a wave of confused murmurs, and once again, the universal translators struggled to keep up. A representative from the psychology department phased forward, their ethereal form flickering with curiosity. Are you suggesting that humans have evolved the ability to consciously override their survival instincts? Override, modify, ignore, or even seek out pain under the right circumstances, Sophie confirmed with a nod. Professor Ethan, his scales shifting to a deeper shade of excitement, responded, "The tattoo demonstration was just the beginning. Miss Brooks, would you please share some of your research findings?" Sophie pulled up her holographic presentation, and several species instinctively activated their protective shields out of reflex. "So humans have turned pain management into both an art and a sport," Sophie began. "We have competitive eating contests with capsaicin levels that would incapacitate most species. We participate in endurance runs that last for days. Some of us even voluntarily jump out of perfectly functional aircraft for fun." The collective cry from the logical progression hive mind rang out. "But why?" Luke, standing up beside Sophie, his own tattoos glistening under the light, replied, "Because we can, and sometimes the things worth doing hurt a little, or a lot." "Precisely," Professor Ethan exclaimed, his scales shifting to an excited purple hue. "Humans have developed a fascinating relationship with pain, one that goes beyond simple survival. They use it for art, for recreation, for personal growth, and even for social bonding. The implications for galactic society are staggering." Dr. Carter's tentacles waved enthusiastically as he addressed the crowd. "We've been underestimating human potential in nearly every field. Their space exploration programs alone—" "Oh yeah," Sophie grinned, causing several nearby species to brace themselves. "You know how we test our spacesuits? We deliberately expose them to damage while wearing them. Sometimes we even practice emergency procedures by swimming in giant pools." The Space Safety Committee representatives had to be prevented from leaving to completely revise their human astronaut protocols. Meanwhile, the military strategy department huddled together in a corner, engaged in a very serious and very quiet discussion. "But perhaps," Professor Ethan continued, "the most fascinating aspect is the social component. Humans don't just endure pain. They've turned it into a cultural touchstone." "Miss Brooks, could you explain the concept of pain comparison stories? You mean how humans always try to outdo each other with injury stories at parties?" Sophie smirked. "Or how we show off our scars like they're badges of honor. It's mostly just for fun." The anthropology department's collective consciousness came close to collapsing under the weight of this new information. A brave quantum researcher raised an appendage. "Are you suggesting humans use pain experiences as a form of entertainment?" "Have you seen our entertainment?" Luke chuckled. "A lot of our movies are just about people pushing through impossible situations, only because they decided giving up isn't an option." Professor Ethan's teaching tendrils flicked, trying to regain control. "This brings us to our most important discovery. Humans don't just endure pain, they turn it into a source of motivation. The more you tell them something will hurt, the more likely they are to attempt it." "It's true," Sophie agreed, nodding. "There's always at least one human who hears about something unbearably painful and thinks, 'Challenge accepted.' We're kind of stubborn that way." The realization spread across the room like a wave of awe mixed with a touch of horror. Representatives from the Strategic Alliance Department were frantically updating their species threat assessments, while the Cultural Integration team took a brief recess to reconsider their approach to human relations. A thought collective spokesperson materialized, their form shimmering with curiosity. "When we emphasize the painful consequences of an action in our safety briefings, are you essentially daring us to try it?" Luke confirmed with a nod. "Yeah, you might want to rethink those warning labels." Professor Ethan's scales shifted to a deep, reflective hue. "Perhaps we've been approaching human integration all wrong. Instead of trying to shield them from potentially painful experiences, maybe you should just make sure we have proper medical care, and then stay out of the way." Sophie grinned. "Trust me, we're going to do it anyway. We might as well do it with the right safety measures in place." The ensuing discussions continued well into the night cycle. Species that had evolved to avoid any form of discomfort were left struggling to understand a race that actively sought it out. The philosophy department immediately called an emergency session to debate whether humans were incredibly brave or just cosmically stubborn. As the symposium came to a close, Professor Ethan spotted Sophie and Luke preparing to leave. "I must thank you both. This demonstration has truly revolutionized our understanding of human potential. But I have one last question." "Let me guess," Sophie said, her eyes gleaming mischievously. "You want to know what other wild things humans do for fun?" Actually, Professor Ethan's scales shifted to a soft, embarrassed mauve. I was wondering, does the tattoo process really hurt as little as you claimed? Sophie and Luke exchanged a knowing glance. Tell you what, Professor, Sophie offered. If you're really curious, Luke here does have his equipment set up. The speed at which Professor Ethan retreated broke 3 Academy movement protocols, leaving the humans laughing and the remaining observers with one final, critical revelation. Perhaps the most dangerous thing about humans wasn't their pain tolerance, but their unrelenting enthusiasm for sharing their unusual practices with the rest of the galaxy. In the days that followed, the Academy issued an official ban on unauthorized human pain tolerance experiments. Yet, paradoxically, that only seemed to increase human interest in conducting them.